The shilas, again, we'll go through them, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. First, I want to mention something I mentioned Friday night, because I always like to repeat what I mentioned Friday night over here. And that is, I was asked, is there an obligation, or why is it that people will go to a kiddush, they'll eat some cake, cookies, kugel, cholent, whatever, then they'll go home. And the entire family was at the kiddush. So it's not like they're going home and half the family, if half the family wasn't at the kiddush, you obviously have to say kiddush for the people that weren't there. But the whole family went to the kiddush, the whole family goes home. And often what they'll notice is they'll repeat kiddush again before eating challah on Shabbos day. And the question is that a requirement? And if not, why do people do it? So it's actually very important. There's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch, siman Reish Ayin Gimel, which is dedicated to the concept called kiddush b'makom suda, which means in order to fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush, you have to eat right away. You have to eat right away. How long is not for now, maybe we'll talk about this next time. You have to eat, and you have to eat a suda. If you make kiddush and you do not have a suda following the kiddush, you're not yoitza. Now, by the way, for the record, that works both people, meaning I'm making kiddush, I have to eat. You're listening to kiddush, you have to eat. If you don't eat after kiddush, you're not yoitza. You have to hear it again. If I don't eat, but you do, then you're yoitza, and I'm not. Whoever wants to fulfill their obligation after kiddush, both the reciter and the listener, has to eat a meal, a suda. What's the definition of a suda? So the mechaber in siman Reish Ayin Gimel Sif Hey brings down from the Gaonim that the Gaonim say you could be yoitza a suda with three things. You could be yoitza with bread, obviously, but that's a davar pashut. You could be yoitza with mezainis, cake, cookies, a kazayis of mezainis, or you could actually be yoitza with a cup of wine. Which, by the way, while we do try to go for mezainis over wine, but wine is an option. So that's why sometimes, if let's say someone will be in a situation, let's say Pesach, right? Generally, it's not a good idea to have a kiddush on Pesach, but I've been at kiddushes on Pesach. Now, I don't eat mezainis on Pesach because I don't eat gebrux. There's no such thing as mezainis for me. So what are my choices? Matzah, after davening, I'm not doing that. So what sometimes we'll do is you'll have a cup of wine. Fine. So I made my kiddush b'mekayim suda. I have my mezainis. I had my cake. Good. I now go home. Is there any reason to make kiddush again? The answer is really no, from a halachic perspective. The Mishabura, Shulchan Aruch Harav, Balatanya, Magen Avram, Chayadim, they all say the same thing, which is, once you yaitz a kiddush, you yaitz a kiddush. If you're able to eat kiddush, if you had your suda enough to allow you to have kiddush, then why are you making kiddush again? There's no real reason to make kiddush again. So why do people do it? They do it because the Bir Halacha in siman Reish Ayin Gimel Sif Hey has a one-line Bir Halacha. He quotes from the Sefer Maisa Rav. The Maisa Rav was a Sefer that compiled the customs of the Vilna Gaon. And he says that the Vilna Gaon was particular to only make kiddush if you were to eat bread. Meaning, although we hold that mezainis is a suda, the Gra disagreed. And the Gra said it has to be challah. So therefore, according to the Gra, every time you're eating at a kiddush, you're actually not yoitza kiddush because you're not having challah. So we clearly don't follow the Gra, hence everyone's eating mezainis. But while we don't follow the Gra, make kiddush again just out of maybe, just to be yoitza the Shitas HaGra. Now you're going to say, well, why would I do this? I'll tell you why. What is kiddush on Shabbos day? So it's customary to say, V'sham, forget about that. It's all customs. What is kiddush? Baruch atah Hashem bar pri hagafen. That's it. So you could do it again. It doesn't hurt. It's just a cup of wine. It's not like Friday night where there's a whole bracha. It's just a cup of wine. So because it's just a cup of wine, make kiddush again to be yaitz to the Shitas HaGra. And that's the reason why people do it. A couple things. First of all, a cup of wine helps, but not a cup of other alcohols. It has to be wine, which is soid. But also, for shal shudis, it's a separate sugya. There's kiddush b'mekayim suda, which mezainis will be kiddush b'mekayim suda, but there's a separate obligation to have challah 3 times because of lecha mishnah, because it says hayom 3 times by lecha mishnah. So that's a separate obligation. Now you could maybe yaitz shal shudis with mezainis just because there are shitas that hold the mezainis is enough. There are also shitas that hold you could be yaitza with fruit, but that's a separate sugya. Kiddush b'mekayim suda and the obligation to have challah are separate. It's a good point, by the way. Friday, it's a good point. Shabbos day, even though you're yaitza kiddush b'mekayim suda, you still have to have challah. You still have to have your sudas lechem because it's a separate obligation. You're supposed to have lechem mishnah. On to question number 2. Someone emailed me that they had a granddaughter, and they wanted to know: is there any bracha that a grandparent could say when they have a granddaughter? So it's like this. Let's talk about a child first before a grandchild. Let's talk about a child. What is the bracha that a parent says when they have a child? So when a parent has a boy, the Shulchan Aruch brings down, as at least the minhag of Ashkenaz, is that they say birchas hatoiv ha'metiv. The parents say bracha hatoiv ha'metiv on a boy. Now,
At what point?
Usually the first time that the baby, they clean up the baby, they clean up the mother, and they say the first possible opportunity, you say birchas hatoiv ha'metiv. Now, that's by a boy. That's the child. Father says it on a son. What about a daughter? So the mechaber does not bring down any bracha to be said on a daughter. So pashtus, there should be no bracha. But the Mishabura brings down, the Balatanya, the Magen Avram, they all say that a parent has the right and should, conceptually, say the bracha of shkiyah. Why? Because the halacha is that we don't do this anymore, but if you haven't seen a friend in 30 days, you say bircha shkiyah. Seeing your daughter for the first time is no less of a simcha than seeing a friend you haven't seen in a while. So shkiyah you could do. That's a daughter. So that's the parent. So the parent either hatoiv ha'metiv for a boy, shkiyah for a girl. The question, what about a grandchild? So the Biur Halacha brings down, this is in Siman Reish Chav Gimel, he brings down a shaila, but he says it's better not to make a bracha on a grandchild. There's no bracha being said on a grandchild. But Rav Chaim Noah, the big paisik from in the 40s from Chabad, he brings down in Sefer Badi HaShulchan, in Ksais HaShulchan, Siman Samach Daled, Badi HaShulchan, Sivkat and Yud, he says you should make a bracha on a grandchild as well. Shkiyah, same thing. The same simcha that you have from seeing a friend for the first time, a grandchild is a big friend, and therefore you should make a shkiyah. Now, how do we paskin? I think we paskin, most paskin would tell you that it is better maybe not to, because it's a suffix brachas, but if you really would like to, and you're drawn to, and you see the grandchild for the first time, and it means a lot to you, you have what to rely on to make a bercha shkiyah. Okay, moving right along. What is the source/reason for ha'esh and putting your hands to the flame? So why is it that Friday night, that Matzei Shabbos by havdalah, not the bracha for the esh, that we want to talk about now, but the question is, what's the whole deal with the fingers and why are we doing this? So it's very simple. The Mechaber brings down in some Reish Ches Sif Daled that you're only able to make the bracha of Barim Ha'esh if you're close enough to the fire and it's strong enough that you're able to say that the fire is strong enough that you're able to see the difference between one coin and another. Meaning, if there's a faint little fire, mamish all the way far away from you, you can't make a bracha. It's too far away. You can't. It's not that you have to actually benefit, but you could conceptually. What type of benefit? That you could hold up two coins, a nickel and a dime, and be like, oh, that's a nickel, that's a dime. So we don't have coins with us on Matzei Shabbos because we don't carry money with us. So says the Mechaber, what they used to do. This is the halachic reason. There's also Kabbalistic reasons, but the practical halachic reason is they would look at their hands and they would look at the nails and look at the difference between the nails and the palm. If you're able to tell the difference between the nails and the palm, that's enough light. So what they would do is they would look, oh, it's enough light. Okay, I can make a bracha now. That's it. So that was the reason the Mechaber says, Noigim l'stakel b'kapas yadayim s'panayim. They would look at their palms and the nails, the nail bed, and the Mishabura says, you have to make sure that the fire is strong enough to know the difference. You have to make sure that it's a strong flame. It can't be a dying flame. So instead of holding up two coins, they would look at their nails. Oh, it's a good one. Now, by the way, also, Api Kabbalah, why is it there's an old minig that, it's an old minig like 600 years ago, women do not drink the havdalah wine. Women don't unless they're making havdalah. But if the husband's making havdalah, normally like kiddush, you pass out the wine. We don't pass out the havdalah wine for women. Why? So the whole Inyan, when Adam and Chava were created, it was supposed to be Shabbos forever. The whole Inyan that there's no more Shabbos and that there's need for havdalah to go back into the weekday is because of the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Who caused the sin? It was Chava. Okay, I'm not judging, but it was Chava. Okay, she was the one who instigated Adam to do it. So says the Shla, because she caused there to be a weekday, therefore as a knas, as a penalty, she doesn't get to drink the wine. By the way, the wine, according to the Gra and the Zohar, wine was the fruit of the Eitz Hadas. So, don't go near it. By the way, some Paiskim, the Shmir Shabbos Kachasa points out that if that's the reason, that l'chora, if you're making havdalah on beer, they should be able to drink from it. Okay, fine. But anyway, the kids, so that's the... So, we all know whatever this medrash means, that before the Eitz Hadas, Adam Rishon and Chava's bodies were covered in nails. Whatever this means. And when they sinned, it retracted to just this. So the nails are very significant. So when you're about to go into the weekday, you're sort of reminding yourself of, look at the difference. I used to be covered in nails, and now I just have this little bit. By the way, that's also why when women step over nails, the Gemara in Nida says that if you discard nails on the floor, nail clippings, it could be very dangerous to a woman. It could cause a miscarriage. Which, by the way, I had a website. I still have a website. I don't contribute to it anymore, but it's called Halacha Blog. I used to put up, when I was younger, I used to put up articles. So when I started, I get a monthly statistics. So you get 60, 70 people a day, because people Google stuff. They Google things. So one day I got 5,000 people coming to my head from a Reddit. So I clicked on where it was. It was some kaifer wrote that they found the new birth control according to Judaism, and that's fingernails. And they sent my article as the Marmakaimis for it. So I was Machadish. It's the Gemara Nida. So what's the pshat? It's a Gemara Nida. It's a Mefurish Gemara. It's not a Kabbalah. It's a Gemara. So what's the pshat? That if you step over a nail, it causes the fetus, the mother to, God forbid, miscarry. Because when a woman is pregnant, she's very vulnerable from a health perspective. Especially because one of the curses of the Eitz Hadas was that the labor will be difficult. So the nails, which are like the symbol of that sin, stepping over it could be ma'ir dinim in shemayim. Okay, fine. The kitzur, that's the reason. Now, by the way, just agav, there's a machlokes achronim. Are you supposed to look at the nails before the bracha or after? What's the pshat? It's actually very fundamental. There's different types of brachas. There's what's called birchas ha-mitzvahs, which is a bracha on a mitzvah, like lulav and esrog. There's birchas hanenin, shehakol. Birchas hanenin, what do? You make the bracha, then you taste. So if this is birchas hanenin, you should make the bracha, then get benefit from the candle. But other poskim hold that you actually look and then make the bracha. Why? Because they consider birchas hashevach. Birchas hashevach is like a rainbow. You see the rainbow, then require the bracha. So it's a machlekes haposkim. Again, yesh v'yesh, or Moshe Feinstein are all shit about it. Okay. No, so the Mishabura then brings down that some say you should look and then straighten it out. Straighten it out like that. Again, that's not Kabbalah. By the way, even if you don't do it, you're yaitze. The whole point is just to show that you could benefit. You don't actually have to. It's just that was the minhag now. Kabbalah, it's a thing, but it's not. It's not the end of the world. Okay, moving on to the next one. Buying things for a baby before the baby is born. So this is a question that I got asked recently. Someone's wife is due, b'shal tova, and they were told not to buy things before the baby is born because of ayin hara. But some things they feel like they should buy, and there's a sale. So this is one of the stranger things. When you look into these sugyas, not just baby stuff, but a lot of sugyas, you'll find the following statement coming up again and again and again, and that is they quote the Rashba. Now, by the way, the Rashba is not in his Chuvas. The Rashba is quoted in a Sefer, Heishiv Moshe, Siman Yud Gimel, that the Rashba supposedly said like this: anytime you have something that there's no source for, but everyone is into it, be careful. Okay, which is like, that to me is like a funny thing. There is zero source that you should not, in the Poskim, no Posik ever said, do not buy. When I say no Posik, I mean from like 200 years ago. No old Posik said, do not buy things before the baby's born. So there's no source for it. But it's something that every person will tell you they don't do. So when you have something like that there's really no source for, but just everyone's makbid, they say, well, the Rashba said that if there's a something, I think his lashon is something that older women are like talking about, be careful. Okay, so there's no source for it, but it's something that everyone's particular with. So I think like this: most Rabbanim would tell you not to buy things that are unnecessary before the baby's born. If you need something for the hospital, you buy it. But I'll tell you what Rav Belsky said. This is quoted. I saw quoted an article from Rav Belsky. Rav Belsky said as follows: whether or not one may buy items for an unborn baby is dependent on one's feeling. If one feels that by doing so it may cause an ayin hara, then one should avoid it. If one is not concerned with ayin hara, such as a case when one is buying it without telling anyone, it may be permitted. That's a Belsky shita. Rav Belsky, I think, is following in the viewpoint of Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe had a shita throughout that when it comes to ayin hara, Rav Moshe's shita always was: if it bothers you, don't do it. If it doesn't bother you, it's fine. That was Rav Moshe's shita throughout. By the way, Rav Moshe had the same shita about marrying a girl marrying a guy who has the same name as her father. It's a whole big sugya, chalal, and the same thing with a woman. So Rav Moshe filed the Chassam Sofer that he basically said it's a little bit like a bee. You don't bother it, it won't bother you. By the way, Rav Moshe Feinstein had two son-in-laws named Moshe. Moshe Tendler and Rav Moshe Shishkel. He had two son-in-laws. Himself, he walked the walk. He actually had two son-in-laws that were named Moshe. His shita was, if it doesn't bother them, then fine. If it bothers you, then don't do it. That was Rebelski's sheet about this. But again, I would say that on a practical level also, until the baby is born, God forbid, if anything happens, the last thing you want to be doing is sending returns. Honestly. So buy only what's necessary. If it's a big sale, how big of a sale? If it's a significant sale, that's one thing. 10% off is not such a big sale. So just something that's the sheet of Rebelski. And just in general, I think people will avoid unless buying what is absolutely essential. Okay. So the next one is I just got an email. If someone is not a kohen, and in his ksuba, his name was written with hakoyin, is the ksuba valid? So I'll answer it. In Igros Moshe, Even Ezer Chel Gimel Simin Chavav, where Moshe finds, he says it's still kosher. He proves it's not for now. He goes proves it's still kosher. But he said it's better to rewrite it, but it's still kosher. 3 more. So another email. Does one need to start or end shema by soif zman krias shema? That's actually a very interesting shayla. Whenever you have these zmanim, chatzois for shachris, soif zman tefillah, soif zman krias shema, is that you have to start by or you have to end by? So the Mishabura brings down in Simin Pei Tes Sifkat and Hey, whenever there's zmanim, you have to be done by the zmanim. That's the Shitas of Mishabura. So if let's say soif zman tefillah is 10 o'clock, you have to be done Shemana Esrei by 10 o'clock. Starting 9:59 is not going to have. That's the Shitas of Mishabura. The Aruch HaShulchan disagrees. The Aruch HaShulchan in Simin Kuf Yud Sif Hey writes, Le'nias daiti nir mitoisis brachis the holchen achar aschala. We go by the beginning. V'im hischil bezman tefillah mikra tefillah bezmana. Afabishin is masay melachar zman. That's Aruch HaShulchan Shita. So practical halacha, obviously, better to be machmer and hold like the Mishabura. But if need be, you could rely on the Aruch HaShulchan. The Ruchai can ask you if I'm mistaken, because you're right. With shkiyah, as long as you start before shkiyah, because there was samich on the Aruch HaShulchan. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Ruchai can ask you Shita is that in his shul, if they would go past shkiyah, they would stop in middle. Like they're done. Like they were done. You gotta be done like that Shita. But I think you're right. The minhag ha'olam I think is to follow the Aruch HaShulchan. I would think so. 2 more shaylas. On Friday, if one is running late to shul and they notice shkiyah just passed, so now it's already Shabbos, can they daven mincha or do they need to do tashlumin with Friday night ma'ariv? So this is interesting. In general, it's obviously always better to daven mincha before shkiyah. But obviously Friday night's a little bit worse because when shkiyah happens, it's already Shabbos. So how do I daven mincha after Shabbos? I'm not talking about a case where you daven ba'i chala and you said licha daidi. Just stam, you run into shul late. Chassidish shuls, they're davening past shkiyah. So I'll say this. The Baal Tanya writes in his siddur the following line, and I'll just leave it as this because it's a much more complicated shayla. The Baal Tanya says, "Le'inin tfilas mincha shemedivrei seifrim." When it comes to mincha, which is only rabbinic, ein limcha biyadam akilin. Do not give musar to those that are lenient. L'spal bein hashmashis, that they daven after shkiyah, bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos. Whether it's weekday or on Shabbos, do not give musar. So the Baal Tanya shita is that while they should be davening before shkiyah, if someone finds that shkiyah passed, I'm not saying super late, within 10, 15 minutes, don't give musar to those that daven past shkiyah. That's the sheet of the Baal Tanya. So I'm not going to give musar. So there you go. One last shayla. I'm going to read it to you. It's a little bit long, but it's actually important because I think people don't know this. Hi. Hello. Regarding the bracha of ala michya, if a person eats both cake and drinks wine, and now has 2 reasons to make the ala michya, right? He makes the ala michya and also al hagafen. And there's a nusach for that. What's the halacha if someone forgot about the wine and just mentioned the cake? Can he still mention both at the end of the bracha, or does he have to make a second bracha? Would it make a difference if he started the bracha mentioning both, but then forgot one at the end? So in other words, like this. If you eat cake and drink wine, you're supposed to make one bracha that has a combination of al hamichya and al hagafen. But in essence, you're really supposed to make 2 brachas, but we just decide, let's put it together. If let's say you started making the al hamichya on Shabbos, you went to kiddush, you ate cake, had wine. You started the al hamichya and you realize, ooh, I forgot al hagafen. You know what the halacha is? The halacha is very simple. Finish it, and then just make an al hagafen. Meaning, you in essence are supposed to make 2 independent brachas. But in order to avoid unnecessary brachas, make it 1. But if you forgot one, then just finish it, and then repeat the entire bracha of al hagafen. That is the ideal approach in such a situation. However, if let's say you're halfway through al hamichya, and you're like, oh, I forgot, and you didn't listen to the shiur, so then you're like, I'll just throw in al hagafen at the end with an al hamichya. It's now unclear whether you're yotza, and it could be your yotza both. And because of this, it's better to not do anything. Let it be safek brachas. But ideally, you have two separate brachas, and therefore, if you realize you forgot one, finish that one. So if you had cake and wine, you're supposed to say ala michya and ala hagafen. You just said ala michya to start. You realize halfway, then just finish it and just say ala michya at the end. Finish that, and then repeat it for ala hagafen, because that's really what should be done initially. We just try to make your life a little easier by combining it together. But if need be, that is definitely the best approach. I will stop here.